Your Royal Highness Prince Radu of Romania, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for the speech on the Romanian Royal House and the modern Romania. And thank you so much for being willing to answer some more questions on cultural diplomacy and your personal involvement with cultural diplomacy.
Thank you. I think in order to understand something about our connection with the political authority in Romania and our presence in the public life, one should go back 150 years ago when the institution of the Crown started to pave the road of what was at the time possible to call democracy and European family. As some people might know, this family of Romania, the royal family of Romania, is a very young family, numbering only 5 generations, including the one of my wife, Crown Princess Margherita. So obviously, having such a short period in history, everything achieved publicly by the house was associated by the Romanians with the modern part of our history, with independence, with a sovereign state, with a liberal constitution, with the good result Romania had after the First World War, with heroic behavior of Queen Helen, the mother of King Michael, and King Michael himself during the Second World War, with an extraordinary example of dignity and representing the real Romania in the time of the Cold War that he was by his being and by his position and by the extraordinary work he did to oppose totalitarianism. And all that created what is today the current position of our family in the society, which includes in an important measure this type of royal diplomacy, if I could call it like that, but it has also a cultural component.
Right. Now, the Organization for Youth Education and Development at the ICD values and campaigns for the empowerment of youth across the globe. Given your experience as artistic director of the first project in Romania of art therapy for abandoned children in orphanages, what insights do you have on the potential role for cultural diplomacy for disadvantaged youth at an international level?
Well, that's probably the most inexhaustible resource we have. And this goes back to many years ago. As you might remember, Romania was a permanent provider of wonderful sportsmen and women, fantastic artists from the beginning of the last century until today. So this kind of fantastic potential in creativity, in arts and science was true for each generation. And most of these people came from a poor background. I mean, today the most celebrated soprano in the world, Angela Gheorghiu, she came from a very poor family in a tiny town in Moldova. So she was not born in Berlin or in London. It's probably something that one should very much consider, especially in our part of the world. And Crown Princess Margherita now, after this extraordinary project with children in orphanages that her foundation created for 8 years in the beginning of the 90s. Now she continues with young talent and gives scholarships to, I couldn't call them children, but they are still 16 or 17 years old, and helps them to create, to develop a career abroad.
More specifically, in Romania, what challenges are facing young people currently, and how can cultural diplomacy play an active role in resolving these issues?
I don't think they face any challenge in the country. It's just a country trying to enforce democracy and to bring prosperity, and many of them choose to work or to study abroad, which is a blessing, because you can't compete in Romania with universities such as Harvard or Sorbonne or Oxford, and so much the better that they become a kind of ambassadors of Romania by studying in these wonderful places of the world and bringing back later something of the knowledge they achieved. So I don't think there is really a challenge. The only problem is that for some of them it's too expensive to study, so they need some help. But that's not new for Europe or for our part of the world. It's always been like that in the last 200 years.
But moving forward to the topic, you have had a successful career as a colonel for the Romanian army. At the ICD, we have created the first ever master's and PhD programs in cultural diplomacy. The students have explored the relationship between hard power and soft power, often debating as to whether these two forms of power are interrelated or are separated phenomena. In light of your experience, what do you think the relationship between hard and soft power is in the 21st century?
It's impossible now to have a delimitation of them, because hard power based itself now so much in this extraordinary subtlety of the soft power that, just to let you know, when I accomplished my PhD in military science, I can't guarantee that more than half of it was about soft power, not about hard power. So it's basically impossible to. I think the simple fact of trying to delimitate them is a wrong approach, because everything changed so much in the world. But also my colleagues in the army, they come from a very different type of generations. 25 years ago, everything was believed to be quantity and hard. The more you are rough and the more you are numerous, the more you are crushing the others, which is so much untrue today.
But would you say that is one more important or relevant than the other?
No. They can't be compared. They exist equally, and the roughness and the lack of fairness of our realities today show that the world of tomorrow is impossible without hard power, and be it democratically or not conducted or led, this is another issue, but without it, it's impossible to survive. And soft power becomes more and more influential, and I'm afraid that we don't really understand it always, because between the east part of the continent and the western part, it's still a huge gap in terms of understanding the philosophy, the approach, the temptations of the other. And this part of our world, the Eastern, the Oriental Europe, developed a very, very strong soft power in the bad times. And this soft power has to be understood in order to be kind of contained.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. But the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on Human Rights and World Peace concentrates on promoting the universality of human rights. Given that you have frequently spoken out about the issue of ethnic minorities, in particular about the Roma minority, an important issue for Romania and southeastern Europe today, how do you think that cultural diplomacy can play a role in bringing people together from different cultural backgrounds?
It's the most important role. It's fundamental, because this kind of misunderstanding or intolerance about the ethnical issues come only from a lack of education. Completely, 100%. You could have prosperity, you could have internet, information, newspapers, everything you want, but if the human being, the citizen of the country, does not understand, it's not educated in the spirit of tolerance, nothing could be achieved. But our country is very fortunate in this way, because in some parts of the country we have in a village of 300 families over 14 minorities. Especially in the western part of the country, in the southern part and in the northern part, there are kind of islands of kind of mini European Union in which a tiny village has 14 different churches, 14 different languages, 14 different minorities, and that obliged the population to experience what means to be different from your neighbor.
Yeah. Well, regarding this diversity, do you think that cultural diplomacy is an important tool in Romania?
I think it is. I think it is. Let's not forget that when politicians were disregarded in my country and nobody believed them, the intellectuals of the country saved the honor of the country. I mean, in between 48 and 89, the good part of this half of a century in my country was performed by the people of culture, by scientists, by artists. They saved the reputation and the dignity of our country, and people looked at them with hope, with pride. I have hundreds of examples about that. So yes, I mean, they were diplomats without thinking of it. I mean, they supported Romania's interest in their way, by their profession.
Right. But Your Royal Highness, considering your role in strengthening Romania's bilateral relations through the promotion of economic, culture and educational partnerships between Romanian regions and different European regions, do you think that cultural diplomacy can be effective in strengthening relations and developing trust between different nations and peoples?
Yes, because the other people exercising power, like politicians, do not have time to go to every single region of Europe to talk about every single region of their country. That's why we are relevant in the country, because we do not have a mandate. We are there for a lifetime. I've been doing it for 20 years, my wife for 25 years. I know every single region of Europe because I go there every 2-3 years, and I try to inoculate in the, not only in Europe, in the United States as well, or Americas, try to explain the people I visit about, to put it on the map of their mind or soul what's going on in the country. So it is, going back to your question, essential, because this is the only part of the society that could take time to kind of connect with the others.
Right. And now a question which is very much related to your speech. As a member of the Royal House of Romania, in which degree do you think that the Romanian Royal House is an explicit element of cultural diplomacy, much more important than the governmental initiatives?
Well, much more important, because the government isn't supposed to develop culture in the country. The obligation of developing the country in cultural and scientific terms belongs to civil society, not to the elected people. I mean, they have to provide funds for that, but the catalyst of it is the society herself. And here we have we just do what the other ones did. In this family, from the very first generation up to the last one, everyone was involved in the Romanian culture and the Romanian diplomacy. Every single royal in Romania wrote books, made speeches, cultivated diplomacy in all ways, and devoted herself or himself to the academic life. It's only going on with this.
Yeah. Your Royal Highness Prince Radu of Romania, thank you so much for joining us here at ICD, and we look forward to have you here again.
Thank you.